return to another of our main stories, the overnight street protests in Turkey. The pro-Kurdish HDP party says more than 100 of its offices over the country were attacked by nationalist mobs, including the headquarters in Ankara. Well, I'm joined by Gulnur Aybet from the Beylikdüzü University. I'm sure I mispronounced it, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for talking to us. This HDP attacks are linked to the PKK attacks. Obviously, some people draw the parallel between the two, but obviously HDP has sworn its separation from PKK. Why do you think, looking at PKK, why do you think the attacks have gone up recently?
Well, because the PKK have been, they broke the ceasefire after the peace process one-sidedly, and there have been these casualties coming in from the armed forces and police because of PKK attacks, and tensions are running very high in Turkey at the moment. And the Nationalist Party have always said from the very beginning that they don't recognize the legitimacy of the pro-Kurdish HDP party. But also, politicians as well as the media have to be very careful because the tensions are very latent and they're there anyway. So the slightest gesture or phrase can spark something like this. And the leader of the Nationalist Party actually called on demonstrations, and these were largely people from the youth wing. I mean, I think a majority of the people in these demonstrations wanted to have a peaceful demonstration, but you always get a couple of people swaying from the crowd and then things get out of hand, and I think that's what happened here. It's very, I mean, a lot of responsibility falls on the media as well. But also the words that are uttered, some of the phrases used by the HDP have made it very hard for people to read their actual intentions, because they've come up with these contradictory statements. Like, first they said, we actually rely on the PYD, which is an armed force across the border in another country, which is totally unacceptable, obviously, to the other parties and to lots of people in Turkey. And that was kind of outrageous. And then on the other hand, they say that they want peace, but then initially they said the armed forces should stop the firing first. And then they said, oh, we didn't really mean that. We think the PKK should lay down their arms first. So they've been actually contradicting themselves in a lot of things they say. And I think this also feeds into the reactions of the crowd.
Do you think there's a danger, though, that this would actually work the other way and solidify support for HDP?
Well, I think, in the region, we're getting a lot of reports coming out that people are just so fed up with the violence because they've seen this happen before. And, there's been a reasonably long period without the violence. And a lot of investment was poured into the region in the past decade. So, I mean, especially people who are just ordinary people with shops to keep and so forth are really wary of the violence returning. And therefore, there's a very harsh condemnation of the PKK. But again, people in their minds are confused as to how much the HDP have actually distanced themselves from the PKK. And I think this is one of the processes that Turkey has to go through. I mean, as the Kurdish political process completely divorces from the PKK, it'll be the end of the PKK. And that's precisely why the PKK have upped these attacks, because for them, time is of the essence to stop that process.
Thank you very much for coming in and talking to us.